Beverly, Kindle Walker, and running for Detroit City Clerk.
Please share your Detroit background and relationship to Detroit. Your history of being a Detroiter.
I am a East Sider all of my life, 67 years. Started out in Black Bottom, was born and raised on Mullet Street in the vicinity of Duffield Elementary School, which is now Ralph Bunch. We moved to further east after urban renewal in the midst of it when I was 6 years old. And so I grew up on Sheridan between Vernon and Charlevoix, went to Butzel Junior High School, Martin Luther King Senior High School.
Tell the story of what led you to run for office.
Well, my parents were very active on our street, Sheridan. My mother was the Black Club president for 20-something years. My dad was a Harley-Davidson rider. He worked at Chrysler, and he was like the block mechanic. My mother was a seamstress, so she was the other half of the family network. And so I always grew up active in helping people. My dad was a part of the Green Slate, which is the UAW slate, and so we always was active in voting. The first memories I have of is them pushing for John F. Kennedy to be the next president. So that would have been 1960 race. So there was a lot of buzz in the neighborhood about that. Then the next active thing we had was Mayor Coleman Young. He was always our state senator, so we knew him. But when he ran for mayor, it was a whole heightened sense of awareness. And so my dad really was pushing for him, and my mother was too. And so that was my first beginning of, organized elections.
What is your understanding of the duties of the office you are running for?
Well, number one is to make sure voters are aware of the opportunity to vote with clear, defined dates in which they are expected to participate, and the knowledge that the vote is sacred. It's important that we exercise our civic duty. And so if that's via absentee or in person, we want every able-bodied person, that should be our goal, for them to exercise their right to vote.
What would you do differently than the current clerk?
Well, as it relates to the election, certainly there are a number of things to do differently. She has a progressive rate of error, and that's going up instead of going down. And so that's a concern of having a efficient election with a minimum of error rates that are human errors. We want to minimize those. Anything that's electronic, that's a little different. But when we have sloppy work done that causes us to be questioned about our output of elected votes and the tabulation of them, then we have an issue there. And so that's my main concern, is about the lack of reconciling the numbers with the actual polling book. So that's a major problem in the election department.
What is your plan to protect democracy and the voting rights of Detroiters?
Well, we need to be conscious of what's happening on the national scale as well as what happens on the local. We shouldn't just push for the presidential elections. We need to make sure we're conscious of the electoral process as it relates to our everyday lives. And so that's the local municipal elections. We should be very conscious of those. We should not concede a point without making a point. So that means you need to vote. If you want to make a point about what's going on in your community, you need to weigh in with it and follow through on what you demand to happen in your community. And the only way you can do that is to exercise your right to vote.
What are your priorities regarding voter education and civic engagement?
Well, number one is getting young people really involved, and so we can have what's called student government. That's what I came up under, and then student council and or clubs. And so the public and private high schools should be engaged in that process. So if we had more civic education where we used to have civic education, we need to bring it back into the public school in the private school arena, so young people can know that we're expecting you to step up to become good corporate citizens by exercising your right to vote. So they need to take the mystery out of the whole process. They need to know city government and county government as well as state and federal, not just when it's presidential. They need to know the whole ball of wax, so that when it comes time to weigh in as a grown-up, you're voting properly as expected of you.
What do you see as the future of Detroit?
Well, the future is the past. So we have to have pride in what we're doing. We have to remember what our ancestors went through to get us to where we are today. So we cannot sacrifice the vote because we are too busy, we're not informed, or whatever the case may be. We need to restore the pride in just that very sacred art of voting. And so that's my number one push, would be to exercise and let people know that this is an important thing that you need to exercise, not just because I believe it, but you need to internalize and understand how we got to where we are today was because of the vote. That one vote makes a difference.
Why should Detroiters vote for you?
Well, we have to restore the trust in the whole electoral process. And right now it has been seriously eroded for over a number of years of various errors and various inefficiencies that have really caught up with us. And so we look at the numbers of people who actually vote. It is dramatically decreasing over the years, the last 10 years or so. And so we have, according to the voting rolls, nearly 600,000 people who are registered to vote. That's almost an impossible number to conceive of, because we have less than 700,000 people who are residents of Detroit. So those voting rolls should be challenged to say, is this a true, accurate number? And if it is, you only have on the average 100,000 people who vote regularly in a local election. That's a pitiful turnout. So I'm saying that we have on average 200,000 who vote in presidential. So that's 100,000 people who are not voting. We need to engage them people. We need to re-engage them and the young people coming up, the importance of every single election. So that's my number one priority. There's some other issues as relates to city council, how that whole process works with the city clerk being responsible for the minutes and the agendas and so on and so forth. That's another area that could stand a little twerking, but you have civil servants in that department who work very well. There are some things that need to happen to improve, but basically the problem is in the election process itself.